Hello and welcome to DTV, your source for news and information about the Knox County Democratic Party. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed the world, and that is no understatement. Death tolls, even in this country, are being measured in the hundreds of thousands, with cases currently surging in Knoxville and other parts of the country. From our family and social lives to our work and recreation, there is almost nothing that has not been affected by the pandemic, and the simple act of voting is no different. High on the list of concerns for voting are maintaining public safety, ensuring fair access to voting, and risks of voter suppression in what may be one of the most consequential election cycles in decades. Here to talk with us about these issues and how they relate to voting in Knox County are members of the League of Women Voters, member Tunisia Holley, and chair of the League of Women Voters, Greenberg. The show will be moderated by Participation, Education, Registration Knoxville's or Perk's Karlyn. Please enjoy the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. We appreciate you. Like he said, we are hoping today to really offer some really tactical tips and tricks around voting safety and how to do that successfully. So we really hope that you today come away with some ways to do that. And I am going to be navigating a couple screens, so bear with me. And we'll just jump right in here. Kathy, start by telling us a little bit about the League of Women Voters, kind of give us about the mission, explain that to us.
All right, sure. And I want to say I'm not chair of the League of Women Voters. I am chair of voter services on the board of the League. And Tunisia is the chair of community outreach on our local league. We are 100 years old, the League of Women Voters in the nation. We started a few months before women were allowed to vote 100 years ago, and a lot has been learned about how to help people to be able to vote successfully. Every state is different. All the laws are different in each state, pretty much. And in Tennessee, you really need to be on your toes to understand them in order to avoid mistakes. Some of us just move through the process very smoothly, but I, for one, just voted absentee for the first time ever, and it was not real smooth. My husband and I had to sit together and say, no, read the directions again to get everything right. So we want to try to help with that for those that haven't done that yet, that choose to vote absentee. So there you see our mission. We are a nonpartisan group, but if you look to the bottom, you'll see we do attempt to influence public policy through education and advocacy. And so we have a political branch as well. But when we are working with voter services, we truly want to honor what democracy is all about, and that is to give everyone an opportunity to make informed choices and choose who represents them and the policies that they would like to see enacted and informed. And we think we can best do that through a very respectful way of talking to candidates, hearing from candidates, but also in informing everyone how to vote, not just people that share a political view with us.
Awesome. I think that's really helpful for folks to kind of know that as the groundwork as we dig into the rest of this conversation. So obviously, like we mentioned already, staying safe and healthy, is on the forefront of all of our minds right now, right? In regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. So explain, some options here that we have, all the different options that we have, when it comes to registering and when it comes to voting. Okay.
One thing that you can do, let's say we're starting out with people that haven't even registered in Knox County, because if you've moved from another part of the state, or even if you need to change your address within Knox County, or if you've moved from somewhere else in the United States, then registration is a big deal. And it must be done 30 days before you're going to vote. We're very close to that for the August election, but there's still plenty of time for the November election. But you can do that online in Tennessee now, have been for a few years. And there's not exactly a link, but it's Go Vote Tennessee. If you type that in on your phone or on your computer, you'll be able to get access to registering online. You must have a driver's license in order to do that. Now, what if you want to vote in the very next election? The law is in Tennessee, you must vote in person the first time, so they can verify your photo ID with you. And then from then on, if you qualify to vote absentee, you're fine. But there is a way around that in the pandemic. And in order to avoid the crowds that may be there for early voting in October and for the November general election, you can go down to the Election Commission office in your county, like say it's here in Knox County, and you show them an acceptable photo ID. We'll be talking about those a little later in the show. In case you don't know about them, you can also find them online. But you show them that and they get you verified. They see that you've registered. They mark down that this stands in for the first time. Because you can go down to the Election Commission office and there might be one, maybe two people in front of you, but there won't be 10, 20, 100 people there. Then voting absentee. Right now, you are eligible if you're a Tennessee citizen and you're registered and you have met that qualification about voting the first time, you can vote absentee. But be aware that this has been appealed, this ruling by the court has been appealed and might be turned over on appeal. And if so, you might not be able to vote absentee later on. If you've already requested a ballot and submitted it, then you're okay for the summer. But you need to be paying attention to the law or going to the Election Commission office website and finding out if that law has changed and has changed for November. I'm sure it'll be all over the news, but you do need to pay attention. But right now, that is one way to stay safe for sure. If you choose to vote if you choose to vote in person, the Election Commission Administrator, Chris Davis, recommends definitely early voting because it's spread out over several weeks. And the best time he says to go, based on what the people working at polls tell him, is about mid-morning during early voting. And probably the earlier and earlier voting is the better. So if it gets down or you want to vote in person, then don't wait to election day if you want to stay safe, given that the pandemic we don't get a lot lower cases in our area and soon.
Absolutely. Well, I know it's complicated for folks, and these are great tips and just very tactical things that folks can take with them. I think that's awesome. Let's switch here to just, some key things, some things to just keep in our heads to ensure success in the registration and the voting process.
Okay, so I would say first, Kathy sort of touched on it a little bit, but I think first and foremost, if you're not registered, you do need to ensure that you're registered. Again, you want to do it the 30 days before any election cycle. Not just making sure that you're registered to vote, but if you have any changes to your name, your address, any of those things, any types of changes, you want to also do that within the 30 days of an election. I would also say in terms of the education process, that for me, if I'm going to say buy a car, or if I am looking to, apply for a job and I want to know about a company, I do my research, right? So a part of our citizenship should be to educate ourselves. And so we do that by doing our research on not just the candidates, but the issues and the issues that the candidates actually support. Because let me just first say that not one candidate is going to agree with you, or you're not going to be on the same page 100% with every candidate. But you should be looking at candidates and their issues and what aligns best with you. And then lastly, you take that next step of participation. And that participation is to actually get to the voting booth or request that absentee ballot in order to vote. And then after that, I think people think that participation actually at the voting booth, but it does not. At that point, you do want to get to a point where you are actually, those that you vote for, you want to actually be holding them accountable for what they said that they would do in order to gain your vote.
Absolutely.
We talk about the win. You want to go ahead and make sure that you're doing those things as soon as possible, because you want to give yourself time. Again, if you go into an election precinct on election day and there have been changes, then at that point, it may become a little bit more difficult for you to cast your ballot. You may be able to cast the ballot on the traditional machine that's used, or you may have to, cast ballot through a provisional ballot. But you don't want to wait to the last minute to actually to know those things. You know, quite often people do wait to the last minute. They actually get to precinct to vote. There are things that need to be done in order for them to be able to do it. And then they say, I don't have time to do this. And so they walk out without being able to, you know, exercise the right to vote.
So yeah, be prepared. Like you said, do your research now. I think those are key tips for sure. I know we talked about it a little bit a second ago, and we'll actually dive into some of these in a little bit more detail in the next couple slides. But tell us a little bit, again, quickly, just about these different options, and then share with us, you know, why you all think early voting is important.
So I'll just say, for me to start off, early voting is important to me because you just never know what could happen on election day to cause you to not be able to vote. It could be personal reasons. It could be your job. It could be, you know, any number of things that could cause you to not be able to get to, you know, that day. But when you have, you know, at least 20 days for the most part to actually exercise that right before election day, I mean, that gives you an opportunity. It gives you a choice on days in which you can go. So I personally use it just because it gives me that opportunity to actually take my time to be able to go. I don't have to stand in line. I don't have to wait. You know, I just feel better knowing that I've already done that, and it takes that worry off of me.
Well, and like we said, you know, in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, I think, Kathy, you mentioned that, is you might be around 2 or 3 people, you know, but you're not going to be around 20 or plus in line. And I think takes off some of that stress, like you mentioned.
Sure. And as we get closer to August the 6th, I mean, as we've seen with COVID-19, the numbers in Knox County have continued to grow. We've had just 18 new active cases today. So if the cases continue to grow, you may be limited on how you move around in terms of in the city. So you want to go ahead and get it done as soon as you can, in order to avoid any other obstacles that can stand in your way.
Yeah, definitely, certainly. We talked a little bit about a second ago, but there has, you know, and there could be changes coming, and it's kind of been complicated. It's been in the news, you know, absentee voting. Every state is different. Let's dive in a little bit into the absentee voting, the by mail. Kind of give us the rundown of that.
So I know that Kathy did mention a little bit about the absentee voting, and that she has already, you know, completed hers. What I'll say is that right now you are able to actually request a ballot based on not just the normal, I think it's 14 or so requirements that the state had, but now you can also request the ballot based on COVID-19. Again, if you can avoid, you know, exposing yourself to this virus, and you can do that by actually requesting an absentee ballot, you should do so. You can start to request that ballot now, and you can request that ballot, up until 7 days before election day. So at this point, that deadline would be July the 30th. There are some things I think we'll go through, you know, later in the call on how to complete that ballot, and some things that you need to make sure that you don't leave off, or that you don't forget, in order to make sure your ballot is able to be counted.
You are spot on, because it seems to be a little bit tricky, and it can be a little bit confusing. So let's run through. I know we'll talk about some other keys to success in a few slides, but let's run through these different tips to just ensure success for that absentee ballot.
Okay. You must sign your request application, and this signature is very important because they're going to match it to what the signature that you put on the envelope in which you put your ballot before you put it in another envelope to mail it. So it's very important that you use your signature. You might download the form or decide to email in the list of information, which you can do without the form, but you must then scan in somehow electronically, get your real signature in on the request, or it will be turned down. So if you go to the League of Women Voters Knoxville website, you can find a list of procedures and these same tips that could help you. It says procedures for voting absentee, and you can download that, and it tells you exactly which email and which fax, as well as the address here in Knox County. Now that is just the local information. But what it will do is speed up your request being seen, because you will email it or fax it directly to the staff member that's in charge of absentee voting. And one thing I want to add is that the administrator, Chris Davis, told me just this weekend in email, tell people to request now if you want to vote absentee. There are so many people over 60 who have decided to vote absentee that haven't in the past. There are now any Tennessee citizen who decides they want to vote absentee. And so they've hired extra staff, but it is getting pretty tight. If you wait until the 7 days before, think about the fact that the request, the ballot has to get back to you after they open your request and get it processed. And then you've got to submit in by mail, not by person. You can't run down the day, election day, and turn in your absentee ballot. They are not allowed to accept it by law. It has to go into the mail. Mm-hmm. You want to be sure you include a complete address. The state form says put in your complete address, and then on the line it's got city and state. It would be very easy to make a mistake and not put in your complete address. If you think about it, of course, they need your complete address to send you the ballot. But nevertheless, you want to be real careful about that. And you might be, one of the reasons for voting absentee is you're not going to be in Knoxville. And then you need to put another address where they will send the ballot. You need first-class postage. If you just put for you and not other people in the household, then a regular stamp or a forever stamp would be enough. Some people like to put 2 just to be sure, but I've been told that should not be an issue. And if you want to vote in a primary, you have to choose, do I want the ballot for Democratic candidates or I want the ballot for Republican candidates? And then you would still get the Knox County general only ballot for this summer, or you can choose just to get the Knox County general only and not vote in either of the political parties' primaries. That is confusing, but just like when you go to vote in person, you have to say, I want the Democratic ballot or I want the Republican ballot. You have to do that for the absentee as well, and they won't be able to meet your request until you do.
So if I could circle back for just a moment, since Kathy kind of was talking about, choosing your ballot, just to go back to those tips. The ballot is accessible at this point on the Knox Election Commission website. Go out there and look at the ballots, see who's on your ballot, so you will know ahead of time so that you are able to make the choices that you want to make, particularly if you're going to vote in person. That way you don't spend a whole lot of time inside of the voting precinct during not just this time of a virus, but even in the future when we don't have the virus. That cuts down on the amount of time that you spend in the voting precinct.
I think that's a great tip. I mean, I think sometimes you get up to the booth and you're like, oh gosh, you kind of start getting anxious a little bit. So being able to
all of the precincts will actually have a sample ballot that you can actually review, but I still think that you should try to do that before you go.
I think that's a great tip.
If I could add to that, we'll show a slide if we don't run out of time with a link to Vote 411. The League of Women Voters puts together a list of questions. Candidates have a chance to write back their responses. They're limited to a certain number of words. And then you can actually compare candidates one to the other. I do this with my husband, and it helps us so much just before we go to the poll to be sure we've made an informed decision. And those for this summer are going to be up, maybe up today. I didn't double check, but very, very soon they're up. And that will certainly be done for November election as well. And then, of course, media and has ways to get information about your candidates too.
And that's the education piece. That's part of the education piece, and educating yourself on the candidates and the issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so helpful to know, because oftentimes you think, where do I go? I don't know what website do I trust these days, so knowing that that's available, I think, is super helpful. I know that we mentioned this a second ago, you know, like the process of requesting the absentee ballot. So before we can do anything, right, we have to request it. And I think we talked about, you know, on this slide is that specific email and link, right? On this.
You can go to the Knox County election site and download the form, or if you don't have a printer, you can call them and they will send you a form, and that'll take care of if you don't know how, don't have the equipment to scan your signature, that will take care of that for you. But of course it would be faster if you can get to the form right now, and you can ask someone else to print it out for you that you know has a printer and get it that way.
But you can also go to one of the Knox County libraries and print that.
That's true. Yes. Yes. So there are ways to get it. I don't think we'll take time right now for the mail and email. I'll just encourage you to go to the League of Women Voters Knoxville site, and you will find this information in the procedures handout that you can click on.
Yes, all the tips and tricks are there. Now I found this, I like this slide because from my understanding, Kathy, you have done the absentee ballot, you did it yourself, and these were some of those things that almost, you as a veteran, I would consider you a veteran, these were some of the things that almost kind of stumped you. Briefly kind of run through these so that folks know these tips and tricks.
The one that's easiest to make a mistake on, I think, is that first one, fill in the boxes. It's a huge rectangle on the ballot, if you haven't seen it. It's not a little bubble like you may have seen when you were in school that you would fill in with a pencil. You must use ink, and you're not supposed to put a check mark or an X. Now, I corresponded with Chris Davis to find out what happens if you just put a check or an X, because that's what it looked like to me, and even did to my daughter, who's a school counselor and should know better, and she didn't read the directions clearly till her husband said, wait a minute, you must fill in, shade in with an ink pen the entire little rectangular looking oval, it actually is, on the form. If you don't, what they're going to do is they will have a representative that's a Republican and one that's a Democrat, and they will look to see if they can verify what your intent is. If enough people make that mistake, it might be March before we know who the new president is, or is the person elected as president for the next 4 years. So pay attention to that one. One of the most common mistakes, according to the staff member that handles absentee ballots, is forgetting to sign the special envelope. You need to sign it. And then you must mail it in the official envelope that's there for you to mail it and put the postage on it. And it must arrive no later than closing of the polls on election day. Now, in some other states, there's a court case to say as long as it's postmarked by election day, that should count. That is not the law in Tennessee. The law in Tennessee, it has to arrive even by the time that polls close. I've heard stories of people FedExing their ballots when they weren't sure. When you get your ballot, you will get a link it's actually to the site to check even if you're registered. And once they have received your ballot and then have processed it, it will tell you, we've processed your ballot. There's nothing there now. I went the day that I mailed my ballot and there's nothing there. And I was assured that only after it's processed, and that might take at least a week. And the closer we get to the election, probably the longer that it will take to find that out. But there is a way for you to check besides phoning and really waiting for somebody to be able to answer your call and check for you. They may not even be able to. They may send you to that link. And again, remember that you cannot hand deliver it. This is not common sense. It's just the law in Tennessee. It must be mailed.
So if I could, real quick for viewers, just in case they do not know or not aware, that when you go to the actual polls, you will not see the traditional dial voting machine. So there is a different machine. You will actually complete a ballot, and that ballot will basically be almost same as what this absentee ballot is, and where you cannot use check marks. You have to use black or blue ink. You do actually have to fill in a square in order for your your ballot to actually process. So there's actually more information regarding that process and the new way to vote on the Knox Election Commission website as well. So
yeah, the tip, fill in the entire circle. Oval, that seems to be the theme, and read directions, right? Read. So we had a little, for the sake of time, we might just kind of throw this on the screen really quick. So we wanted to quickly just throw some of those voting 101, just some links here. There are tons of resources out there that vote411.org, and of course the Knox County, Commission website. We encourage y'all to take a look at all of that. But we're going to just keep moving here a little bit. But what I think it was mentioned at the beginning, we do want to highlight, the League of Women Voters. We are, these ladies are extremely dedicated to engaging our community, and that's why we say yes to opportunities like this today. And as a part of that, I am a new member of the Perk Team, so participation, education, registration, Knoxville. I'm a representative from the YWCA, Knoxville, and the Tennessee Valley, but there are over 18 other organizations that are part of this team. So please know that organizations such as Centro Hispano, such as the NAACP here in Knoxville, the Knoxville Area Urban League, all of these folks are being asked questions in order to engage and to best get this information to the different communities that we serve as separate organizations. So please know that the League of Women Voters is dedicated to having different voices, different people at the table in order to really disperse this information. So we wanted to share that information with you all, and to know that there will be more coming from this Perk group in the coming months. So keep your eye out for that. But as we're talking about, these different these different communities, right? That the different organizations, like I work for the YWCA, but all these different groups, we wanted to kind of touch on and just remind everybody who is eligible to vote in Knox County. Can y'all share that with us?
Okay, if you must be a U.S. citizen, you must have a legal or permanent address in Knox County, and it must be updated if you move. Now, what if you're homeless, which right now is a very difficult thing to do, but if you can give a street address where you've put up your tent, you can use that as your address, or you can use where you stay, and you'd still be able to vote if you've got an acceptable ID. You do have to be 18 years of age or older on or before the next election. So if you wanted to help people get registered, say in your family or with friends that are 17, but they will be 18 by the next election, which is now in August, then they can go ahead and register. If someone is going to be 18 in time for the November election, you must wait until 30 days after. You can send in the registration form, but that person would not be able to vote, and they will not process a 17-year-old's application who is not going to be 18 by August. So it'd be best to wait till after the August election. If you've been convicted, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we have about 1 minute left. So what about, I know students, we wanted to touch on UT students quickly.
Let me say, there is a panel next week. In fact, Tunisia and I are both on that, for Rock the Vote, that's being held by UTK and open to everyone to register. So I would encourage you to go there. Students face some real dilemmas, perhaps, if the university has to shut down and they need to go back home where that is. But students are allowed to register to vote in the county where they are living and going to school. You do not have to just be at your home. So if you were going to hang out here, whether the UT is open or not, or some other university or college, you can still vote here. You just have to follow the rules for getting registered.
And I would say, if you're not registered here, go ahead and request your absentee ballot.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
That's the advice. Yes. Yeah. Who knows what's coming, right?
Right.
You still have to deal with the voting in person the first time, unless you go to an election commission office and get approved.
You all will talk about that. So yeah, so next week, Rock the Vote, we'll be having a panel. So folks need to look out for that. If you have a
Tuesday at 5:30, I believe it is. Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Good stuff.
Well, thank y'all, Tunisia, Kathy, and Karlyn, so much. Thanks to everyone who helped organize this today. Thanks to Doug Viam. And be sure to watch our next episode for DTV. thank you so much for watching, everyone, and thank you to our participants here today. It's been a great discussion. So we will see everyone next time. I'm Michael Davis, and thank you for watching DTV.